draft season.
A main event team on FFPC $2,000 entry team. Grand prize of $1 million.
I'm looking for that $1 million top prize.
Main event season is in full swing.
Welcome back to this special TGIF edition of the GOAT District High Stakes Fantasy Football Show. Today's guest needs no introduction, making his sixth appearance in the district, none other than Andrew Cooper at Coop A Fiasco from Fantasy Alarm. Coop is widely regarded as the tight end whisperer in fantasy, but his insight stretches across every position and format, especially high stakes tournaments like the FFPC. So stick around, especially for the tight end segment later in the show, where Andrew shares his signature approach to drafting the position in 2025. Who's he targeting? Who's he fading? And how to pair the right tight ends together to maximize your roster builds. Let's get right to it.
GOAT District, you know the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text? That trash offers the best? You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden, they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice, from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man, y'all know what to do. It's the... And I always be traded. And I always be traded. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.
What is up, Fantasyland? And happy Friday, July 18th to you guys. As you see on the screen, squished between two of the sharpest minds in fantasy, especially the high-stakes streets. I got my boy Dan Williamson back from his deep woods canoe trip, helping the girls move. I mean, Dan, you should just have a professional moving company at this point with your three girls keeping you busy in different states. So glad to have you back. And we have one of our favorite guys back in the district for his sixth appearance, Andrew Cooper. Andrew, buddy, we're pumped to have you back, man. We got a lot to talk about today. We've got a special tight end segment right at the end of the show, so make sure you guys stick around for that. How you doing, Andrew? How's life with, what do you have, a 3-year-old now, which must be exciting.
Gonna be two at the end of the month.
Or
so
two.
Not quite yet, but she's starting to get there. She's starting to act like a terrible 2 and 3. But I'll tell you what, man. I'm just happy to be back on here. I'm happy the GOAT District is back. You had us all a little scared, but I mean, when that intro music plays, tread bone. And I know earlier you said the tight end whisperer. To me, there's a brotherhood of tight end whisperers. Howard Bender was a tight end whisperer to me, and I'll tell you, you got one right here, Dan Williamson. He knows the secret handshake. He knows everything. I mean, it takes a village in the tight end community, and we got to look out for each other and look out for the position. So I'm happy to be on here, man. It is going to be a good one.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it. You are one of the chief tight end whisperers amongst the entire crew, though the lead tight end whisperer, as it were. And it's just been amazing to watch your star rise over the number of times you've been on the GOAT District. I mean, it's like this is a man who is not only going places but has gone places. So we're excited to have you back on.
I think this might have been the first podcast that I was a guest on. I'm not even kidding you, because originally when I started, I actually met a bunch of people through the Scott Fish Bowl, Linda and you actually were in that group chat with us in that league with us, right? And I started a podcast with like Linda and JB Barry and Kevin Tompkins and Jordan Loop. And then that was the first ever podcast I had. I actually had my microphone was, if you remember correctly, was just like sitting on an ironing board because I didn't have like any sort of setup. That was the only thing I could get to like have it at the right height. And like, you know, I was like, you and I were doing that lead together, and you were like, oh, we have a show. And you noticed that I was on a show for the first time ever because we had the Fantasy Besties or whatever, and you were like, come on ours. I was like, okay, yeah, awesome. You know, like that might have actually been the first time I was a guest, and I've been coming back ever since, 6 times.
Yeah, I had to look back, Dan, in the archives to see how many times Coop was on. I knew it was a few times, but he goes way back. I think early, like 2022 was kind of the last one I spotted, and it may have been even a little longer than that. But we've all been there, whether it's a phone book back in the day that you're using to put, or like a thick book, you know, to put a mic on or a camera on, and you know, you got to start somewhere. I mean, look, Dan and I are like what 8-9 years in. We still have tech challenges on the weekly, but
of course.
Either way, we're here to bring the goodness to help you guys crush your drafts this year, and that's why Andrew's here. Like they said, we got 2 tight end gurus in the house, but we got 2 high stakes fantasy gurus in the house. So we're going to start macro level, and then we'll go through each position and look at some cloudy situations that you might be on the right side of or the wrong side of. We'll get to see that as we go through the show. But let's start off macro, Coop. Let's look at kind of 2025 as a whole. Looking at your drafts so far, what's your read on how to best the drafts in 2025?
Yeah, your first few picks are always going to dictate what happens with the rest of your draft. My general strategy has always been the same. I learn all the strategies out there and the targets for the popular players, you know, 0 RB, hero RB, late round QB, yin and yang tight end, bully tight end, whatever it is. I just know you figure out what the landscape is. And that way, in the beginning, you can kind of be like water and be flexible and just take the best available players. That's kind of the way I do it, is like, hey, in my opinion, it's a mistake to sit down at a table and say, I'm going to go 0 RB here. But if you get up from the table at the end of the draft and say, oh, you know what? The wide receiver value was there. I had to pivot to a little of a 0 RB. That's okay, right? Like, use the strategies, but don't pigeonhole yourself into it. I will say this. My early read on how the boards are going, I find that I am not taking either of the top 2 tight ends or either of the top 2 quarterbacks off the board, just because what I do is I make a big list of players that can be the number 1 flex player in fantasy football. Now on FFPC, where that's tight end premium, that does change a little bit, right? Like now all of a sudden those guys are in play. In a normal league, a normal 12-team league that doesn't have the tight end premium, it's incredibly rare for guys to be drafted in the first 3 or 4 rounds as tight ends and actually pay off at that value. It's basically been Travis Kelce that's done it a couple times, and then you have to go all the way back to guys like Rob Gronkowski and Jimmy Graham to find a situation where it happens. So if it's a non-tight end premium league, I don't find myself taking Bowers in the 2nd round where he goes. I don't find myself taking McBride in the 3rd round. And because I don't find there's major differences amongst the top 4 quarterbacks with Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, and Jaden Daniels. I have Daniels ahead of Hurts, but anyway, those are the 4 guys. I find myself just taking whoever falls out of those groups if I'm going to take somebody from the top group. So that's my general read, is that in the vast majority of my drafts, the first 4 picks I make are some combination of running backs and wide receivers.
Yeah, Dan, a lot of, I think, things that we've echoed in this very show with regards to being like water. I call them tools, the different roster builds. I'm not necessarily going, it's kind of like poker, right? Like you don't sit at the poker table and say, I'm going to play tight or I'm going to play loose today. You're looking at your opponents, seeing how the game flows, and then you want to adjust, usually yin when other people are yanging. Dan, anything to add with kind of macro level, anything you're seeing recently in the drafts? I know another point that he touched on that I liked was we talk about Hurts being a huge value this year because he is kind of that last guy in that tier. And with the tight ends, we'll get deeper in it later on. But what do you have anything to add, Dan, to what Coop has given us so far?
No, I think where he's at is right, basically where I've been settling in at as well. I think your first couple of picks are really important, and you need to have an idea of what you want to do. Assuming that the draft breaks pretty according to ADP or whatever, because it's going to set up the rest of your draft. So I think you want to, in the first 2-3 picks, have an idea. This is what I want to do. But you also have to be open to the fact that some value may drop, or some other situation might present itself, in which case you'll take advantage of it. But by setting that up, you can kind of say, okay, well, if I'm going wide receiver in the first 2 rounds, because I think I'm going to be able to get from this particular position, whatever it is, the 3-hole, the 6-hole, or whatever, that's who I think my best 2 players are. Then now I can start planning, hey, what am I going to do in the 3rd round? What am I going to do in the 4th round? Where do I think I'm going to be taking that first, running back? Things like that. So you can kind of plan, but, also you still got to go with the flow, exactly like Coop was saying. You've got to be able to roll with the punches and figure out, hey, this draft is breaking a different way than I thought. I've got to adjust. So, but yeah, I'm basically right where Andrew is. I think in the FFPC, you probably do want to have a little bit of exposure to Bowers. You probably want to have a little bit of exposure to McBride, but I'm not making that, like a linchpin where I'm going to be grabbing those guys every draft or anything like that. And I think there are a lot of other great ways to go. And as Andrew, I'm sure will point out, it's hitting tight ends late that really turbocharges your lineup. And that's, if you take the early tight end, you kind of don't leave yourself as open to that. So.
Dan, Hunter Henry has officially surpassed Marshawn Lloyd as my most owned player on the FFPC. So I'm definitely all about those late tight ends. And welcome to the chat, guys. You guys are already crushing it. Jamie's there, Joe, 1912. We got Paul, and of course, our boy, the Harry Snowman in the house. So keep dropping any questions you guys have, any comments you guys have. We appreciate all of it. Make sure you smash that like button and you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any of this goodness. We're going to jump right into it, guys. You recently talked about one of my most owned quarterbacks in Dynasty Superflex, Andrew, and Drake May. I wish I had more in redraft, and that's something I got to work on, I guess, moving forward. But you recently dropped a video comparing Josh Allen, Bo Nix, and Drake May. How did these guys compare, and where can we capitalize with them in these 2025 drafts?
Yeah, and the first thing I want to point out for drafting any of these guys, Josh Allen, Bo Nix, obviously Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels, Jalen Hurts, Kyler Murray, is that if you go back through history, right, and you take every running back, every quarterback essentially through the history of this game that has played, that's played at least 16 games. So at one point a full season, as of late, 17 games of the full season, and run at least 85 times, every one of those quarterbacks has finished top 10 in fantasy football. And 85 carries is 5 a game. 5 times 17, 85. That's all you need. You need a guy to run 5 times a game. There's some guys that can easily do it, other guys that aren't willing. But when I look around at a guy like Josh Allen, right, what really is the difference between what Josh Allen and Bo Nix did last year, statistically speaking? I mean, on paper, Josh Allen and Bo Nix threw for very similar yards per game. Bo Nix actually threw one more touchdown pass per game. Josh Allen ran 102 times. Bo Nix ran 92 times. The big difference was Josh Allen had 12 rushing touchdowns. Bo Nix only had 4. And we know that rushing touchdowns can be fluky. We don't know if the Bills are going to combine for 30 rushing touchdowns again this year. So for me, I look at those two guys and I'm like, okay, decent value here. But then I look at Bo Nix versus Drake May, and I ask myself, what really is the difference between what these guys can both offer? Right? Drake May actually, right? So Bo Nix ran 92 times for 430 yards. Drake May ran 54 times for 421 yards. He was much more efficient running. And they actually asked Alex Van Pelt last year, the offensive coordinator for the Patriots, around week 13, it was week 14 actually. They go, why more run plays for Drake May? And Alex Van Pelt straight up said, we're 3-11, right? There's no reason to risk our young star quarterback on designed run plays. So he did all that on scrambles last year. They come in this year with Josh McDaniels as the play caller, a guy that was calling bootleg traps for Derek Carr when he was with the Raiders, right? And he was the coordinator for Cam Newton, and Cam Newton ran for over 100 carries at 31 years old. People don't think that Drake May is going to run the prerequisite time to have the minimum amount of upside we need to be a top 10 quarterback. I mean, he could easily be this year's Bo Nix. Bo Nix could be this year's Jaden Daniels, and so on and down the line. Jaden Daniels could be this year's Lamar Jackson. Like, it's the easiest cheat code in single QB leagues to give yourself access to that upside. And Drake May is a guy where you don't even have to draft him as your first quarterback. You can go out and draft somebody boring like Brock Purdy or Jared Goff, and then circle back and take him at QB 15 and redraft. So, yeah, I'm excited about Drake May. I truly think that he's going to run the ball at a high level this year, and that's all you need. That's all you need for and upside.
Dan, where are you on May this year and that New England offense versus maybe, a guy like Bo Nix? I know I was in a Dynasty draft early this season in a startup and ended up taking Drake May actually ahead of Bo Nix in that draft. Maybe I could have waited, but I just wanted to make sure I had my man.
Yeah, I'm definitely in on May here, especially at his price, because, the quarterback is one of those positions where you really can get arbitrage versions of, the guys who are going in the, third, fourth, fifth rounds later on. You just have to know which guys to target. I mean, if you're out there targeting, Jared Goff as being a top 6 quarterback, I think you're probably going to be disappointed. But Drake May is a top 6 quarterback, much better chance that you're going to be right. Jared Goff probably has a maybe even a little bit higher floor than May does, but does not have near the ceiling. And, when we're trying to win leagues, we're concerned with ceiling outcomes a lot more than floor outcomes. And in single quarterback, you can go get that floor outcome pretty much any given week off the waiver wire or wherever. It's not that important to cover your floor. What's important is to try to find that ceiling, and if you can find it late in a draft, that gives you one more shot at that wide receiver or running back who can potentially be a league winner for you. So I'm totally in on that. I mean, I love Bo Nix, but he's just going at a spot where it's like, I feel like I'm trying to middle it there. It's like, I'd either rather just bump on up to, Josh Allen or Jaden Daniels or somebody like that, or I'd rather bump down to Drake May or JJ McCarthy or somebody on those lines. I feel like Nix is just kind of caught in that no man's zone where it's just not really worth it to take him. And, because I can get somebody later that can give me, I think, just as good or better. So I don't know how you feel about that, Andrew. Are you in on Nix at price? Do you think he's kind of weirdly valued here? Or?
Yeah, that's exactly it. He's weirdly valued, and it's not even that I dislike him. It's that
right.
I actually like Kyler Murray in that range if I'm going to do something there. That's the problem that I run into, is that if I'm going to go there in that range, I don't usually take too much Mahomes or Baker Mayfield unless I have the correlations. And if I'm going to take kind of a standalone guy in that range, I usually take Murray. But oftentimes, like you said, I don't take any of them because I think Drake May offers similar, if not better, upside, and he's going far later. And I think Drake May is probably the quarterback that we could see be this year's pre-draft Jaden Daniels. If you remember last year, word just started getting out. A lot of sharp people were writing about Jaden Daniels, and then he actually moved way up in August, right? So there's a real possibility that Drake May gets that kind of bump, and people start thinking, hey, you know what? In this range, I draft 2 quarterbacks anyway. Might as well take the upside guy first, since I can always circle back, and there's plenty of guys, like you said, J.J. McCarthy and even like Matthew Stafford and these guys. So I think there's a real possibility that May could be bumped up, which is why I'm taking a lot of him now while he is like QB 15, 14, 13, depending on the platform.
Yeah, Snowman talking about a main event that we drafted. We actually took Bo Nix and then paired him with one of our favorites, and it sounds like one of your favorites. You coined the term conglomerate discount. Can you break that down and how it applies to Dan's Vikings out there in Minnesota? And like I said, a target that I think all of us like in J.J. McCarthy in that offense in Minnesota.
So my original background is in finance and accounting. That's what I went to college for. And then I got into real estate. I was a loan officer. I appraised commercial real estate. Eventually I was like buying and selling commercial real estate. Now I talk about football on the internet. So pretty standard career path right there. But when I was in college, I learned this term, conglomerate discount. And what it basically is it's like a stock market arbitrage type term where you look at a company that is a conglomerate of many smaller companies. Nowadays every company is a big conglomerate. They sell books, but they also sell microwaves, they sell whatever, right? And what you would do in that case is you look at the parts of the company and how they're valued. And if all the parts of the company are like if you like those parts of the company and you value them highly, you look at the stock price, and sometimes the stock price does not reflect the conglomerate of the values underneath. And we do that at quarterback a lot of times. We look and we say, hey, you know what? Jamar Chase, we like. T. Higgins, we like. Joe Burrow, we like. And a lot of people won a lot of money last year stacking those guys up. This year, that guy, Chase goes in the first round, Higgins goes in the third round, and Joe Burrow goes at that like 4-5 swing a lot of times, at least at the 6-7 swing, because the guy with Chase or Higgins is going to take him. And that's kind of the way that goes. There's a lot of opportunity for that out there. And J.J. McCarthy is a perfect example, where we look at it and we say, Justin Jefferson, I'm willing to take him as the wide receiver too. And Jordan Addison goes off the board as a top 30 wide receiver at the very least. And T.J. Hockenson goes off the board as a top 5 tight end. If we believe in at least 2 of those values, not even all 3, I don't even think all 3 historically is not really, it doesn't really work out like that. It's very difficult to have 3 guys on the same team all get 100 plus targets. But if you believe in at least 2 of those guys at ADP, then J.J. McCarthy is going to blow his ADP out of the water. And that's kind of the way it goes here. Sometimes you don't believe in the assets and you don't want the quarterback, but that's the whole thing with J.J. McCarthy. The quarterback last year, Sam Darnold, got MVP votes and supported all those weapons at various times, and they moved on from him because they believe in this kid. So I think it would be wise of you to have at least some exposure in your portfolio, just because of the possibility that he comes out and he plays like Sam Darnold. And Sam Darnold was a great quarterback in fantasy last year.
Dan, I love anything Kevin O'Connell touches offensively. I know you like J.J. McCarthy. Give us your quick thoughts, and then we'll jump to a question from the chat.
Yeah, I mean, O'Connell he's a quarterback whisperer. So, McCarthy, I think, is going to do very well. If Darnold and, Jaron Hall and, Josh Dobbs and all those guys they've had since Cousins can do as well as they've done, imagine what they can do with a guy that they actually selected, as a number 10 overall pick and that they really wanted. And here's the thing also, McCarthy's a better athlete than people are giving him credit for. Everybody thinks he's going to come in and be, like some pocket passer. And I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I think he can use his legs as a weapon, maybe not as well as Drake May, but, I think there's some underrated athleticism there that also can be a boost to his price. And, so he's a guy that I'm definitely in on, because, as Andrew said, hey, if Sam Darnold can do it, I'm definitely going to bet on J.J. McCarthy at, the cheap prices we're being asked to pay for him here.
Yeah, and look, just to add on to that, like historically speaking, you look at the draft classes. I actually did a little study on this where I went and looked at each, like what situations had the quarterback 3, 4, and 5 hitting off draft boards in drafts. And it's actually very rare for the quarterback 3 to hit when the quarterbacks 1 and 2 don't. But in these like really good draft classes, that's when you get these guys that get drafted as QB 5 and 6 to be awesome. So like betting on Jalen Hurts on his own might not have been a great bet, but when you look at that draft class, all the quarterbacks hit, right? Like Tua and Lamar Jackson and Herbert and all these guys. You look back at last year in this draft class, and we like all these guys. We like Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams, and we like Drake May, and we like all the guys that went ahead of this guy. This could just be a draft class where all these guys are actually really good, and that's why some of them got pushed down a little bit, but it has me really interested in J.J. McCarthy and also Michael Penix, because if it turns out to be one of those classes, which it very well might be, then there's a real possibility that all these guys are great.
Totally.
Joe Carlton from the sports affiliate, Dan and I were on with him a couple weeks ago. Go make sure you guys go check that out. We talked some high stakes strategy. He's asking about Caleb, which I find interesting. There's a few factors there. Obviously, Ben Johnson is now in Chicago. So maybe you can comment, Andrew, on how you like him going in this year with the weapons around him. They added a couple more in the rookie draft. And then also just how a new offense plays in as a factor when you're looking at these quarterbacks. It is going to be his second year as a starter, but his first year in this offense. How does that play a factor in your decision making?
Yeah, I love Joe Carlton. I'm actually going to see him on Sunday at the Scott Fish Bowl Boston live.
Nice.
So,
nice.
I look forward to seeing you in person again, Joe, my guy. So that's the thing. There are a lot of moving parts here. The scrambles last year for Caleb Williams, we have to remember that offensive line was pretty brutal. He got sacked 68 times, which led the league by like a wide margin. So he was kind of running for his life to some degree. But he is a guy that, to me, I split quarterbacks into three groups. There's the pocket passers that just have no interest in rushing. Jared Goff, right? Jared Goff has 2 rushing touchdowns over the last 4 years combined. Then you've got the mobile, the rushing quarterbacks, right? You know, guys like Justin Fields, where like clearly they are pure runners. Then in the middle, you have the mobile quarterbacks, guys that I think, you know, can potentially run 90 times, but are probably more of like 60, 70, 80. They look downfield. They look to make big plays. This is where Caleb Williams kind of, the comparisons to Patrick Mahomes come from. Because Patrick Mahomes, as you know, he doesn't stop trying to make the deep throw until there's nothing there, and that's when he runs it. Some guys just look to run it. Caleb Williams is that kind of guy where he looks to make the big play first and foremost, and then if there's nothing there, he will run it. So I don't necessarily think he's going to be one of the like guys that runs 100 times, but with Ben Johnson in this scheme, he could definitely throw for a huge chunk and still offer enough mobility to be a Patrick Mahomes, Baker Mayfield type guy. Like, all you have to do is run for 300 and 400 yards and throw for, you know, 3,500, 4,000 to be in that group. So it really, if Ben Johnson comes in and does his thing, it's going to be great. And I'll tell you, they easily had the biggest improvement in the offensive line by far. It's not even close, right? Like, they went out and spent big money on the O-line, as they should, and they're going to be looking good this year. So again, the bet is that they can implement this offense and get it running at a high level early. But he feels more of like a safe play to me than he is like a guy where I'm going to say, okay, this guy could run 125 times and just completely break it, you know?
Yeah. So here's what I don't like about Caleb Williams. Brock Purdy being right next to him in ADP, because you know what? If everything goes right for Caleb, we're probably talking about he's sort of Brock Purdy. Right. And Brock Purdy is already Brock Purdy. I don't have to make any bets on that. And, you know, part of what really bugs me about Caleb Williams is just the fact that, you know, I do think that despite the fact that his offensive line was not good, quarterback sacks are often a quarterback stat more than they are an offensive line stat. And I think in his particular case, you know, when you start digging down into the analytics and, you know, what he was doing from clean pockets and everything else, you know, there's just nothing that really looks good. And I know the offense was a mess last year. He had, you know, basically he was floundering on his own, and we're talking Ben Johnson is coming in here and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, basically when I look at what was wrong with him last year, you know, a lot of it is things that come out analytically, you know, things that are coming out in the numbers, the stats. And when I try to talk about what things go right, then I got to switch over to Narrative Street. And that always makes me a little bit nervous when I got to go to Narrative Street to talk about what things are going to go right, how they might go right. In that case, I'm just going to look to pivot to somebody who's already doing those things that I don't have to make these big gambles on. So I'm going to take Brock Purdy every day over Caleb.
He's in no man land there for sure. And especially in best ball, I have a hard time clicking him because I don't have like strong feelings for the pass catchers. Like, I don't go out of my way to draft even DJ Moore. The rest of the guys, you don't know who the guy's going to be. So I don't love the correlations in best ball. So I don't really find myself clicking the name much. You know, if he was a pure mobile guy, then we would go for it. But you can get access to that slightly before with Kyler Murray and after it with Drake May. So I don't click the name much.
Yeah, Chicago's a funny one because I feel like I don't leave drafts too often without a piece of that offense, but I don't have that much Caleb Williams. I know I've got him like in a triflex, a one QB dynasty on FFPC, and I've got like a couple of pieces from that offense, but I do find it hard. Dan, you talk about Purdy, just the opportunity cost in that range, and that's why I had the board up there. Is, you know, makes it a little harder to click on him. I think it's kind of like we talked about those top guys at other position. You know, you kind of want to have some of Caleb because it is possible he pops. His situation does improve between the offensive line and, of course, Ben Johnson coming in. Andrew, is there a quarterback that we haven't mentioned yet or that we haven't talked about? I'll put the draft board back up that maybe you like in drafts this year. So especially for like 2 QBs or deeper league drafts,
the big conglomerate discount guy that I'm looking at is actually Matt Stafford. So the thing with Stafford is, you look at, like, let's take the Joe Burrow example. Jamar Chase goes 1 overall. T. Higgins goes, or at least he goes in the first round regardless. T. Higgins goes in the 3rd round, and then Joe Burrow goes around like pick 60 or so, right? You look at the Rams, Puka Nacua goes in the 1st round, and Devontae Adams goes in the 3rd round, not far after T. Higgins. And then Matthew Stafford goes 100 picks after Joe Burrow. 100 picks after. I'm not saying that he is Joe Burrow, but in a 2 QB league or a best ball especially, you don't need the full season that Joe Burrow has. What you need him to do is piece together a handful of games at the end of the year where he throws for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, and the vast majority of the passes go to the 2 players, Puka Nacua or Devontae Adams. I mean, that's what happened last year with the teams that won the big money in the big tournaments, is they had Chase and Higgins and Burrow, and a couple of the games were big Chase games, and a couple of the games were big Higgins games, especially the last week where he scored 3 touchdowns. That's kind of the formula, and I don't see why the Rams can't potentially do that just at the right time for you in best ball or anything like that. And I also look at guys like even Purdy and Jared Goff and these guys where I say to myself, why am I paying up for this when I can get something very similar? So for me, he's the guy I'm going for late. The guy that I would be fading is Jared Goff. The offense is great. My concerns with him is he has no interest whatsoever in even doing QB sneaks for touchdowns at any point. Like, the only time he basically did it over the last couple of years was a game when both David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs are both hurt. He has no interest in running. And that team now is getting much better on both the run game and on defense. I've been calling it the DJ Khaled corollary when I do the show with Howard Bender, where they're starting to suffer from success, right? Patrick Mahomes went out and when he was 12 and 4, he threw for 50 touchdown passes, right? Peyton Manning one year went 12 and 4, and he threw 49 touchdown passes. The very next year, both teams got better in the run game, better in defense, and they went 14 and 2. The teams were better, but you saw them throwing for like 25, 30 touchdown passes, and you saw the running backs just doing a lot more work and the games being a lot easier. Like, I just worry that the Lions, some of these games might be a little too easy for lack of better term, where it's like, yes, they're willing to go for it on 4th down, they're willing to do crazy things, but I don't think that they're going to necessarily get themselves into as many shootouts with just a better run game and a better defense. So Jared Goff, just not a guy that I really go out of my way to grab. Again, unless I'm going for like correlations with Amon-Ra St. Brown, or I also don't find myself drafting Sam Bora that often. So he's just not a guy I'm really picking much. I think you're muted, JD. JD,
apologies, guys. I went to turn off the AC so that the humming was in the background. I was just saying, anyone watching Netflix these days know why Jared Goff is not doing any quarterback sneaks. He's got his Sports Illustrated supermodel girlfriend that he's he's got to stay pretty for. He can't be hurting any bones. Dan, I know right. I'm kind of in this range as well. I mentioned, like, you can easily paint your board green and yellow in the FFPC these days, and then just wait for this range that you talk about Stafford. I like Penix in this range. I like Geno Smith a lot in this range. I took him in the fishbowl. There's a lot of value at the quarterback position. Dan, is there someone specific we haven't mentioned yet that you like targeting?
Yeah, I'll throw Bryce Young out there. I mean, if you're in on Caleb Williams, this is kind of the path that you hope Caleb is going to be taking, is, the one that Bryce Young took last year. And, it still took him about a half a season to, kind of work out all the bugs and everything else, even with a really strong offensive guru head coach who could help him out. Now, he's got better weapons. He's got, he's looking better in this offense. He finished really strong. I mean, you can't count on him getting, the 6 rushing touchdowns that he got over the last few games of the last year. Things like that probably aren't going to happen. But, now you've got Tep McMillan. You've got Thielen healthy. You've got Leggett, who looks ready to take a step up. You've got a good running game. You still probably have a terrible defense there. which is always going to help your quarterback out because it's going to keep pressure on him to keep throwing the ball and keep, moving his legs and everything else. So he's a guy that I definitely like, taking way late in drafts. I think he's kind of a fun player. And, if I get any deeper than that, probably what I'm going to do is just wait around and go for Cam Ward. Because you know what? Cam Ward could totally bust out. He might not be any good at all. But you know what? I think if he is an NFL quarterback, he's going to be a very, very good one. It's one of those players that I see, it could be ugly or it could be great, but I don't really think he's going to turn into one of those players who's kind of in the middle.
Yeah, Bryce Young, I mean, he was holding his own against the Chiefs, holding his own against the Eagles down the stretch there. Like, those were good football games. The
defenses
defense played bad, but yeah, good football games from him. So absolutely could see that.
Patience sometimes pays off, even in fantasy. So you've already talked about Goff as your fade. Let's get into the running back position. Everyone's super focused on this rookie running back class, right? We're talking about these guys, especially with, guys like Harris getting hurt, that kind of stuff in the offseason. But which second-year running back are you drafting most in 2025, Andrew?
So this might surprise people a little bit, but I've been grabbing a decent amount of Trey Benson. He just is very affordable. One of my highest rostered guys on Best Ball for sure. This is a guy that he didn't really get a huge opportunity last year because James Conner, for the first time in a long time, was very healthy. I mean, like, he's never played every game in a season. Even last year down the stretch, he hurt his knee, missed the end of the year. But Trey Benson, I mean, everything that I hear from this guy is great. I mean, I know you can't just listen to what the guys are saying, but he came out and said that last year he realized he was playing too fast. Like, he would get in the game and he'd be so excited that he would just be like, this is my only shot. I need to break off a 70-yard play here. And in watching the film, he said that he recognized that he was not being patient enough. He was not waiting for the blocks to develop. There were a handful of plays where he could have had a 70-yard touchdown if he actually played it right, waited for the kick-out blocks and the gap schemes, or if just read, took his time and read the zone blocking schemes a little better and kind of moved down to the next gap. Like, things like that, when you hear a guy say that, like, he understands. He understands the game, and the game should slow down for this player. The other thing is that when you listen to him talk, he doesn't sound like a guy who wants to play more. He sounds like a guy who's been told that he's going to play more. So I'm interested to see if maybe he can be a handcuff plus just without an injury to James Conner if they mix him in more. He said that one of the things he said is that he and James Conner work out every day, and now he's up to the point where he's lifting the same amount of weight in every lift they do that James Conner does. Which, if anyone's seen James Conner, like pictures of him like flexing his back, this guy's a monster. James Conner last year led all running backs in forced missed tackles per game, something like 4.3 per game, which was more than Derrick Henry, more than Kenneth Walker, like just absolute monster. So there's a real possibility. And the other thing is that there's no one else on that depth chart that matters. So it's like, for the same reasons we look at Tyler Algier and Zach Charbonnet, that like, okay, if something happens, we know who the guy is. If something happens to James Conner, I think Trey Benson immediately becomes the guy, and happens to James Conner every year. I don't like playing the injury prediction game, but if I had to guess on one guy to get hurt, it would be Darren Waller. But if I had to guess on a second guy, it would be James Conner.
Nice Waller shade. I love it.
Had to throw. I will, because I have to be honest with you. I can't say Conner if he's not my number one pick. But yes, James Conner. I mean, I love the guy. I still pick Conner all the time because I don't like playing the injury guessing game. But I mean, the guy has gotten hurt every single year of his 9-year career.
And he's been a beast, and like we said, we like that offense, right? So it makes sense with where Conner is in his career. That's one of the reasons Marshawn Lloyd is one of my most owned players in fantasy right now. You've got Josh Jacobs with over 330 touches last year, and he's obviously in his 30-plus part of life. So, Dan, who's someone, if we haven't discussed him already, a second-year running back that you're targeting right now?
Yeah, I'm also in on Benson. We'll leave aside the very obvious Bucky Irving, who I think most people are probably in on. I mean, he's going way up in the second round, basically. So I think it goes without saying him. But another one I'll throw out there is Ray Davis. I think this is a place where James Cook has been pretty publicly disgruntled. We're not exactly sure if he's going to hold out or not. He's sort of that he wouldn't, but he also didn't guarantee that he wouldn't. If we've got anything going on with Cook, who's basically played way above his head, he got a whole lot of touchdowns that it was very, very much an outlier season for him. And Ray Davis, I think, could step right in there if anything happens to him. And I think that Ray Davis is going to have some standalone value. I think that the Bills have to be looking at what's going on with Cook and saying, hey, if we're not going to pay this guy this year, we're not going to pay him next year. We need to know what we have, and we need to be figuring that out during the course of this year. So I think Ray Davis is probably going to have some good standalone value as well.
I'll tell you right now, I know you're going to ask me at some point who a running back I'm fading is, and I'll just say it right now. It's James Cook. I do.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm with you, brother. I do a little thing called the running back questionnaire, where I go through each team and I break it down in a chart into the different roles: early down, third down, goal line, 2-minute drill, and garbage time. And 2-minute drill is different from third down because it's a whole different set of schemes. The plays are usually kind of drawn up in advance. You can't substitute guys out, so they need to know all the pass blocking schemes and everything, right? When you look at the Bills from that standpoint, James Cook was the starter. He was out there on first downs. On third downs, he split that work with Ty Johnson. Actually ran more routes. Johnson was also the 2-minute drill back. So anytime they were in a 2-minute drill situation, Ty Johnson was the guy out there, right? In goal line, they split the carries right down the middle inside the 5-yard line between Josh Allen and James Cook. And then for garbage time, Ray Davis actually got more carries in the fourth quarter when they were up by double-digit points, so 9 or more points, 2 scores. Anytime they were up by 2 scores, so 9 or more points. Ray Davis got more carries than James Cook. Guys like Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley got an extra 40 fantasy points each when their team was up 2 scores in the fourth quarter because they continued to get those carries to close out the game. With the Bills, James Cook, the only thing he does that's squarely his job is to be out there on first down. Everything else is either split with another player or fully done by another player. And I think that's why they're hesitant to pay him.
152 yards he put up last year, Ray Davis, against the Jets, week 6, and 6 red zone touches as well. So definitely with the James Cook situation and everything you guys brought up, he's cheap, right? And especially those 0 RB builds, those anchor RB builds, he's definitely a piece that I like throwing in those builds. Let's go to Dallas. Dan, I'll go to you first on this one. You've got Miles Sanders there. You've got my boy Mafa. You've got my boy Blue. Hey, Blue. And then you've got Javonte Williams, which I think everyone in fantasy land these days cringes when that name comes up. Who are you targeting in that backfield in Dallas? Who do you think might help fantasy land going into 2025?
I mean, I'll tell you, I'm leaning into the cringe a little bit. I don't mind some Javonte Williams. The guy's a great pass catcher. I don't know if he'll ever be the player that he was before, but if he continues to get touches, he can continue to, he's going to be a little bit of a compiler as a runner, I think, at this point in his career. But Dallas has shown that they're kind of okay with that at the running back position. So, and you look at, Jaden Blue, words coming out today that, he's not a very good student. He's not very focused. He has not been running with the ones at all. You've got Miles Sanders, who's, basically fleshed out of a couple of teams already. I don't hate Sanders either. And then you got Phil Mafa, who is, just kind of the ultimate very late round wild card, all of that. But you know what? At the price, Javonte Williams, he's a name I'm going to click on some of the time, because if you can get that Cowboys starting running back, that's not a bad position to have there. I don't think he's going to be a league winner or anything like that, but I think he can be a solid RB2.
My problem, Cooper, is that opportunity costs. I like guys like Zach Charbonnet, I like J.K. Dobbins, I like Trey Benson, who you talked about. I even like Ramondre this year more than I know that maybe Dan does, but it's just where he goes. It's hard for me to take him. I don't think I leave this offseason without some Javonte, but where are you in this backfield? Is there anywhere else we can look to maybe get it's upside for me. I don't know if that upside is there with what we saw last year in Denver.
Yeah, right now I'm just playing the game, the value game. I do worry with Javonte, not just about like the knee and whether he's going to be back up to full speed ever again, but you look at like the Vegas odds for him. I mean, I would rather just go in and bet the over on his rushing yards. Like DraftKings has him set at 575 rushing yards for the year. Like, if I'm going to bet, that's where I'm betting on him. I right now in July, I just look at it before camp, and what I've been doing is this: two running backs are getting all the first team touches, Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders, and one of them just goes drastically farther lower in the draft than the other. So I do draft Javonte Williams when he slides. He's not a completely off my board guy. If he falls like 10 picks below ADP, I just scoop him up in that draft and move on to the next draft. You know, we're volume boys here, so you got to have respect for the game in that fashion. But for me right now, I just sit back and I take Miles Sanders if he's there with one of my last few picks if I need to bolster my room, because right now it's a 50-50. If we get into training camp and they're telling me that Jaden Blue is he's crushing all his assignments and he's pass blocking and not getting chewed out, and he's actually running with the ones, then that might change it. But right now, there's two guys running with the ones, and one of them's cheap. So that's where I live.
Chuck Bass asking, why are we asking this guy about RBs? Like we said in the intro, guys, this man doesn't only cover tight ends. Obviously, he's a tight end whisperer, like we talked about, him and Dan being part of that club. But the man's got takes, and he's one of the best in the game. So we want to hear him talk about all the positions. So make sure you tune in the
Chuck.
back end of the show. Sorry?
That's right.
I said, eat it, Chuck.
Eat it, Chuck.
That's right.
No, make sure you guys, obviously we kept the best for last. We've got our tight end talk parked in the back end of it. So let's just do a bit more running backs here, and then we'll get to a quick break from our friends over the FFPC. The Chargers is another offense, especially now with the Najee news, that people are, kind of all over the place with regards to which, do they take Najee at a discount? Is Hampton now the guy that you want to be grabbing earlier? What are your thoughts on this Chargers backfield, Andrew?
Yeah, the big problem that I run into with the Chargers that, again, guys will change up the scheme from year to year depending on the personnel and what they have going on. But right now, I look at a guy like Greg Roman and what he's done historically with his running backs, and it is not appealing to the guy that's on pass downs. I mean, go and look at Frank Gore's career. Frank Gore was a guy that was catching 50 balls a year, 50, 60, 70, if you count like his per game pace. And then the 4 years where Greg Roman was the offensive coordinator for the 49ers, he was getting 20 looks a year. 1 year, he went from like getting like 60 receptions a year to 1 year only getting 19 when he played 17 games, because Greg Roman just kind of prefers to hand the ball to his backs. And, he got more carries that year, but you look at the way this is set up, and I love Omarion Hampton. In Dynasty, he was my number 2 overall player in all formats, even Superflex, after Ashton Genty. I like the guy a lot. Guys like that have a super high hit rate, with his production and his draft capital and the landing spot. But for year one, there's another guy with a 1 year contract, and he happened to land in one of the few spots where the other back is bigger than him. Like, he's 225 pounds, and he happened to land on one of the few teams that has a 230 plus pound back. So I really do worry that it's just going to be split down the middle, in which case, for me, the better value is going to be the guy that goes later. Like, and Nathan Yonke over at PFF had a pretty jarring study that he did on running back usage that basically shows that the starting running back in virtually all cases is more consistent. They have more RB2 weeks. They have more RB1 weeks. The ultimate upside is situations where the pass catching back takes over the entire job and becomes the full-time starting back. That's like the highest upside situation, guys like Austin Eckler and all that. But in most situations, for redraft purposes, the starter usually is the better option. So if Najee's going to start, and Omarion Hampton is going to be the kind of change of pace back, third down back for a coach that doesn't like throwing to the running back, that really sounds like it's going to set us up for disappointment. And like, it wouldn't be the first time, because like, even for Chargers, I watched Melvin Gordon lose work to Danny Woodhead in the red zone, and because he was a rookie, and His mom wouldn't wear his jersey until he scored a touchdown. I don't think he scored a touchdown all year. Like, and he was a great player. It's just sometimes they have other guys they like. So I do worry, with Najee. Of course, there's the path for Omarion Hampton that he's just so good that they can't keep him off the field. That's entirely possible. But the other path is that they look at it and say, hey, we got two good players. Let's use them both. And then Hampton's ADP all of a sudden becomes a little squirrely, and Najee's is actually great.
Dan, real quick, give us your thoughts on the Chargers.
Yeah, the big part of it to me is just that they're on starvation rations when it comes to targets, and that's a hard place to really excel as a running back if you just aren't getting those targets in there. So, I don't think that either one of them are are going to be terrible picks and they're going to lose your league or anything like that. But the opportunity cost of taking a player who has just got such a capped upside target wise, it's just not worth it to me.
Yeah, I do think you got to have a little exposure if you're a volume player, just in case. I mean, again, because if Najee Harris goes down, now this guy's a league winner. So you do he's not you cannot have a 0% portfolio of Omarion Hampton. It's got to be or Najee Harris, to be honest. He's not a guy that I'm making a priority.
That's why I took Omarion in the Scott Fish Bowl just to hedge my Najee Harris bag. That's a little heavy these days.
He's the exact kind of guy where if the pick comes up on me and he's at the top of the queue and everybody else is going, he's like a full round below where he's supposed to go. I take him every single time that happens because now I can tell myself, not only did I get a player that I know I need to have a little exposure to, but I got him at a better value than the people that are reaching for it. That's kind of how I treat guys like that.
Rapid fire, Andrew. Favorite RB target that we haven't talked about and a fade.
So I faded James Cook already, so it doesn't get more rapid than that. With one guy that people hate this pick, but I find myself taking a good amount of Tank Bigsby. Just because I think he's more efficient than Travis Etienne. He could be the starting running back for that team, just like Bucky Irving was more efficient than Rashad White. And Pearsall Tootin, exciting upside potential, but he's a day 3 back. Like, he could be the breakout day 3 guy, or he could be this year's Kamani Vidal, or he could be used like Sean Tucker. Like, Liam Cohen basically had Bucky Irving as the starter and Rashad White as the pass catching back, and then Sean Tucker as the third down back. What happens if Tank Bigsby, the more efficient player from last year, is the starter, and Travis Etienne is the Rashad White, and Pearsall Tootin is Sean Tucker? That could easily happen, in which case Tank Bigsby ends up being one of the best picks at ADP in the draft. I know he hasn't shown great hands, but he caught just as many passes in college as Pearsall Tootin, more passes.
Dan, rapid fire, favorite target and fade that we haven't mentioned at the running back position.
Yeah, fade. I'll go with Joe Mixon. Just don't like what's going on there. I think the offensive line has gotten worse probably than better. He's been nursing some kind of injury that all of a sudden made the Texans want to sign Nick Chubb. I think Nick Chubb, if he's healthy, is just flat out a better runner than Mixon is. There are a lot of things that could be happening to squeeze Mixon out of carries and everything else. So I'm not loving where he's going. I'd rather get out on him a year early rather than a year late. Deep sleeper, I like Rashad Smith out of KC. I think he's got a real chance to develop a role. I mean, basically we're looking at Pacheco, who I do think is going to come back and be just fine. I'm a little bit less worried about Pacheco than a lot of people are, but Kareem Hunt is so dusty. He was basically thrust into a role last year, and they needed to use him, and he did kind of okay with it. But he certainly wasn't lighting it up in any way, shape, or form. And then you've got Mitchell, who basically is built out of like fine china, cannot stay healthy. You can expect him to be on the injury report anytime he gets used very much at all. So, and then you've got Rashad Smith, who they really seem to want to develop a role for. If there's a Jerick McKinnon in this backfield, I think it's Rashad Smith.
You guys are not very good at rapid fire, so we're gonna have to speed through a bit more in the next positions before we get. But stick around, guys. We've got a huge tight end section on the back end of this show. I'm gonna go with Garendo as my target. My fade is Aaron Jones, and then my deep sleeper is DJ Giddens. We'll be right back after this, guys. Make sure you use the promo code DRBALLER, DRBALLER, and you'll get $25 off your first team on your first deposit at myffpc.com. They got a monster amount of tournaments, drafts, Dynasty, redraft, you name it, they have it. Best ball. Go check them out if you're not already on the site and reap the rewards by using the promo code. Guys, let's go. We'll try to go a little quicker through receiver here, but there are a couple situations I did want to touch on. We'll start in Buffalo. Khalil Shakir, obviously off a fresh new contract, and second year Keon Coleman is someone I've been adding quite a bit, especially recently. Given the additions and the structure of that wide receiver room, who are you targeting, Andrew, out there in the Bills land?
I'll keep it quick. I'm fully with you. I'm going for Keon Coleman because he has the upside to play split end, play a full-time role. Like Khalil Shakir, they basically use him like Cole Beasley. And his stats last year looked no different. His usage and his statistics looked no different than 2020 Cole Beasley. In fact, 2020 Cole Beasley in this offense put up better numbers than Khalil Shakir just did. So unless somebody comes to me and says, oh yeah, Shakir's going to play out wide more, they got all sorts of new plans for him, just not really interested in that type of player, especially in any sort of tournament where I need to beat out multiple other teams. I just need more upside.
Andrew, your camera's a little fuzzy. I don't know if you want to try to leave and come back, or if I don't think it's on mine because Dan's clear and beautiful.
Let me jump and come back.
Yeah, go ahead. Dan, while we're waiting, why don't you give your thoughts on the Bills Mafia receiving situation?
Yeah, I mean, my true answer is, can I target a different wide receiver room instead? I'm just not real big on any of the Bills just because I think, to them, it's kind of a collective like Green Bay was last year. There's no number one receiver here. They're just gonna, it's a bunch of role players, and they're not really concerned with promoting anybody to an alpha role. So, if there's going to be nobody in an alpha role, I'm going to be a little bit less interested in taking chances. However, if I gotta take somebody, it's probably going to be Keon Coleman. For the reasons that Andrew laid out. I think he's got the most upside in the backfield. I think Shakir is just a guy who's capped as far as what his ultimate output can be. I don't see him becoming any sort of Amon-Ra St. Brown or anything like that.
Looking a little better there, Andrew, for sure. It's a little fuzzy. I mean, we can hear you fine, so it's not bad if you want to play around with it. Maybe I'll go to Dan first on this one. So I was listening to a beat writer or an insider for the 49ers, Dan. Obviously, with Juwan Jennings in the news these days, wanting more money. You've got Aiyuk coming back from his injury. It looks like from what I gather, it looks like week 6 is kind of a time that he could be back. That would make sense just based on his quick recovery. Them having a short week, I believe, is week 5, their short week, and then they come back. So week 6. I'm guessing maybe that puts him around the same time as Rice, but where are you with this 49ers receiving game, Dan, when you're drafting these days?
Yeah, Aiyuk is kind of, if he drops from where his ADP is, I'll go ahead and get in, a share or two. I think in managed leagues, it's almost a little bit tougher to sit there and hold Aiyuk for, 6 weeks or whatever we think it might be. If it looks like it's going to be less, then I get more interested. But I even using an 11th round pick or, something like that on Aiyuk is still, I feel like there might be better uses for an 11th round pick rather than somebody who's going to just, sit on my bench for several weeks for sure. Jennings and Pearsall, man, those two guys are kind of tough to figure out because you know what? Jennings really did kind of break out last year. Pearsall had some really encouraging games. So they're both players that I kind of want pieces of. They're both going similar spots in the draft. So I'm kind of, playing whichever one is, falls to me. is who I would rather get. But this is not a, again, a wide receiver room that I'm really feel like I've got to go out and get somebody. If I'm going to go out and get somebody from this team, it's probably going to be Kittle, and I'll worry about the rest of it later.
Yeah, favorable schedule for sure in 49ers land, but a bit of fuzz when it comes to the receiving game. I'm loving the Garendo. I still love me some Garendo when I look at that offense. Obviously, Kittle, Purdy, we talked about. Now, maybe I'll go to you first, Dan. Why don't you give me a quick kind of, looking at target, fade, and then maybe a sleeper if you want to throw that in there as well at the receiver position.
Yeah, one of my targets is definitely Tech McMillan. I think he's still too cheap. He's going as wide receiver 24 in the FFPC Big Gorilla. If I can have, number one wide receiver who is drafted within the top 10 picks on an ascendant offense that's going to have a bad defense, everything kind of lines up for McMillan. So I think he's a guy that I'm definitely in on pretty much, regardless. I think he can rise a good bit further, and I'm still going to be in on him. Out on, I would, we already talked about Shakir. He's probably the guy that I'm most out on. Cooper Kupp, I'm also not really wild about him. I think he might be just done. And my deeper sleeper, give me Igbuka in Tampa Bay. I think he could really have a role. Mike Williams is 32 years old. We've got Godwin, who's, we don't know whether he's going to even start the season, playing, or whether he's going to be put on the PUP or something like that. And also, they play 11 personnel an awful lot of the time. I think it's like 83% of the time or something like that. They're playing 11 personnel, which means Igbuka is going to be on the field as long as he can beat out Jalen McMillan, which I don't see as being a big problem.
It's a good thing I went to Dan first, Andrew, because I thought I had you on the screen, and then I saw you kind of waving and saying, "I'm here," and I was like,
I don't know what's going on. It's getting progressively fuzzier, but
it's all good.
Right? Is it
We hear you great.
Yeah, we hear you perfect. Is it a webcam that you have?
I've never had this issue. I don't know what's going on. At the beginning of the show, everybody looked fuzzy on my screen, but now it's just me.
It could be your internet. The other thing, I don't know if you have a Brio, but if you go in the software, play around with that. That happened to me when I was on with Balkman. Actually, my camera kind of went berserk on me for the first time, so I had to play around with it.
First thing I did was run a speed test. Speed test is no problem, so I don't know. I guess we'll just keep rocking. And
it's all good. You sound good. Yeah. We've got a good silhouette of your face. Everybody knows the beauty that you bring to the game. Why don't you tell us some wide receivers that maybe you're targeting, fading, and a sleeper if you've got one?
Yeah, so one guy I find myself drafting a lot right now is Michael Pittman. Last year played through a back injury, broken back, so not like a disc or a ligament or a muscle or anything. It's a bone that they say is healed, so he should be good to go. And despite that, he still led the team in targets. This is a guy that, commanded 140, 150 targets, a guy that was the wide receiver 13 playing with Gardner Minshew. Gardner Minshew was throwing for like under 200 yards a game. If Daniel Jones gets the gig, great. If Anthony Richardson gets the gig, that means he's throwing the ball better. So I just feel like that's a guy that has big upside as an every down player and the captain of that team. I know people love Josh Downs. I like Josh Downs too, but I needed to see him play more. Last year, in the game that Pittman missed, they put Adonai Mitchell into a bigger role. In the game that Alec Pierce missed, they put Adonai Mitchell into a bigger role. Josh Downs never really transcended that 60 to 70% snap share. I hope he does. I have him in a lot of dynasty leagues. But Michael Pittman at like wide receiver 50 is a no-brainer. One guy I'm not really drafting a ton of is Xavier Worthy, especially now that his ADP is going to go up with the Rashee Rice situation. Last year he got they were missing Rashee Rice. They were missing Hollywood Brown. You would have expected him to pop at any point, but he really never had a game better than 80 yards. I know he adds a little bit of rushing and kind of that boom-bust potential, but I don't really go crazy on guys like that unless it's best ball, because like trying to predict where and when a guy is going to get a couple carries like Jamison Williams or Xavier Worthy, I don't like doing it. For later guys, I like Darius Slayton with Russell Wilson and his deep ball ability. I also will take Tutu Atwell with my very last pick, especially when I have Matthew Stafford. Yeah,
I laughed
it's
because
crazy,
I
right?
just did that. I did a draft with Mason Payne, a live draft, and I had a Stafford stack, and I actually took him with my last picks. That's why I laughed there.
Because yeah, exactly. Because it's like when you have Stafford, you look at it and you're like, look, they've used more 3 wide receiver sets than any other team in the league, so he's going to be on the field. Demarcus Robinson's gone. If anything happens to Puka Nacua or Devontae Adams, now this is a guy that's just getting 8, 9, 10 targets a game. And just last year, when they had injuries to Nacua and Cup, he would go out and get 8, 9, 10 targets a game. So for a very last pick, it's hard to find guys that have the potential to play 80, 90% of the snaps. But Sean McVay is one of the few coaches that's willing to do that.
And I talk about, Andrew, how the Rams they're definitely a contender, right? They're not looking to rebuild. They're contending. Atwell's been there. He's been in that offense for a few years now. He understands it. He knows where to be. Stafford can rely on him. So he's at his price. You mentioned Adonai Mitchell is another guy I really like at his price. I find the Colts as a whole this year, people are kind of sleeping on. I think last year everybody loved him when AR was coming in because of Stryken being there. But whether it's Daniel Jones or an improved AR, I mean, they still won games last year, and they were still putting out points. So I think with all the pieces, you look at that roster, it's pretty loaded. I think people forget how good Pittman can be. You've got the rookie Tyler Warren in there. So a good offensive line, decent offensive line. That's why I like DJ Giddens with Jonathan Taylor missing some time. Some guys I like, there's 3 guys that are kind of in the same range and that we saw flashes of last year, and I think can really take steps this year, and that's Rashid Shaheed, Cedric Tillman, and Marvin Mims. All 3 guys that we saw nice flashes at different points of the season. They're going in the 12th, 13th round right now, the big gorilla. And to me, again, if you want to add depth or you're trying to build on a stack, those are 3 guys that I really like targeting. All right, it's finally here. You guys, you guys want to hear, obviously, the tight end talk. And, that's obviously one of Andrew's strength among many, but we've got 2 guys here in Dan and Andrew that really understand the position, really play it well in fantasy. So let's start it off with the rookies. I mean, this year, I say there's like a changing of the guard, Andrew, when it comes to the tight end position. You've got your Kittles, your older guys, your Mark Andrews that have been in the league, and then the Hunter Henrys we've talked about, and even down to Conklin now in LA. And then you've got this nice handful of rookie tight ends that come into the league. What is 1 or 2 of your favorite this year for 2025 that you think can actually produce for our listeners, whether they're doing best balls or redraft right now?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how it shook out because it's a really good class, but they didn't really get the ideal landing spots that we wanted for the most part. Like we all wanted back before Ingram signed, we wanted somebody to go to the Broncos, we wanted somebody to go to the Chargers. That would have been ideal for like Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland. And I wrote a piece on this years ago where I explained what it takes for a rookie tight end to break out and why it rarely happens. It's because you not only need to be the best pass catching tight end on the team, but you also need to be a top 2 target on the team. We always talk about that, the top 2 target. And at the time, I wrote about why Kyle Pitts would have a tough opportunity, and then Julio Jones got traded, and he became a top 2 target on the team. He had 1,000 yards as a rookie. Since then, we've seen Sam Laporta in that position. We've seen Brock Bowers in that position. This year, though, the top guys, I don't really know if Tyler Warren can be that guy unless you really are fading Josh Downs, right? Because like Michael Pittman got 111 targets with a broken back. Like he's going to get his 100 targets one way or another. Same with, if you look at the team like the Bears, if you fade Rome Odunze and Luther Burden and you really think Colston Loveland's going to play a ton despite Cole Kmet being there, go for it. But I have a hard time painting that picture. The guy that has the best opportunity for 2025 is the guy that I rank as my tight end 5 in Dynasty of this group, Mason Taylor. The guy I didn't like as much for Dynasty because in college he blocked on 16% of his pass plays. They had him in line for 70% of his snaps. But I mean, you look at the Jets. Who's the best pass catcher after Garrett Wilson? It's probably Breece Hall. And we don't see running backs go out and get 110, 120, 130 targets. So Mason Taylor could immediately be the second best pass catcher on his team. That is the opportunity, is the number 1 path to upside of the position. So of the rookies, it's got to be Taylor.
Love me some Taylor in that narrow target tree out there in New York this year in the white and green. Dan, who's your favorite? Are we still going Loveland here? I know this might be where you guys are not on the same page, or do you have someone else that you've been targeting a bit more lately as a rookie tight ends?
No, actually, I mean, Loveland is somebody I love long term.
Me too.
I think, by the time at least we get to 2026, he is probably going to be a big target of mine in 2026. This year, not so much, just because of, there's a lot of pass catchers to sort through there. I see a path for him, but I don't know that that's the most likely path. And so, I would rather be focusing on more likely paths. I think Tyler Warren could get there again. As Andrew said, you've got to get around the Josh Downs problem. And if everybody's high on Downs, it's a little bit harder to see what Warren can bring. But on the other hand, Warren's a guy who could kind of bring a little bit of, he can carry the ball. He could even throw the ball a little bit, So you can see a path where he could kind of conglomerate some other things along with his touches and make it all work out. But it's again at a high price. So yeah, I'm definitely in on Mason Taylor. I think he's probably the most likely of the rookies to really have a good year. The volume in the pass game is probably the biggest problem for him. Plus the fact that he's just a rookie and we don't know. But right now he's the bet I've been making the most often among the rookies.
Yeah, it's hard not to click on Taylor. I was hoping to be able to stack him in the fishbowl with Justin Fields, who I took as my first quarterback off the board. But he's a popular guy right now. That's kind of the thing. He's climbing up the boards. The more shows like this happen, and the more he's talked about. Now, as a whole, Andrew, I was listening to you recently talk about something I do at the position with regards to like balancing. If you're going to pair some tight ends together to have a nice balance, I talk about putting Hunter Henry with maybe a young rookie or a guy like Strange that we don't necessarily have that much tape on. How do you approach the position when you're pairing? It sounds like you're doing, like maybe an upside guy with maybe a more stable guy. Maybe talk about that more in depth for our audience.
Yeah, so we do yin and yang tight end is what we call it, where it's like you take a safer player and you take the highest risk, highest reward guy you possibly can. The problem that you run into with just taking two risky players, which is usually a very attractive proposition, is that the risky guys a lot of times can't be trusted right away. Like even Mark Andrews, his breakout year, hard to just draft him and trust him as your only tight end. Trey McBride in his breakout year was behind Zach Ertz for 7 games. Logan Thomas, when he finished as a tight end 3, he actually was the tight end 26 through 6 weeks, right? Johnny Smith last year, his first 4 games, he had a game in there with 0 catches. He had a game with 1 catch. He had a game with 2 catches. It's just hard. You can't lose too many games early on. So what we do is we try and take a guy who's safe, but also has a little bit of upside that we kind of trust to start right away. And then we just use one bench spot with the highest risk, highest reward guy. And if you wait on tight end and you start your draft with 8 or 9 running backs and wide receivers, you can afford to use one bench spot on a tight end. So like you said, if you wait and take somebody it's kind of safe, but maybe boring. In a shallow league, like a 10-team league, you can actually take somebody like Evan Ingram for that. In the deeper, bigger leagues, I'm looking at Tucker Kraft or Hunter Henry. Hunter Henry's my go-to guy. He's I know we love him because there are 2 paths to being a top 5 tight end. 90-plus targets or 10-plus touchdowns. Not only did he get 97 targets last year, but we don't really project anyone to have 10-plus touchdowns, but this guy is so good in man-to-man in short areas that, it's not even a bad bet that he could potentially get there that way. So those are the safe guys. And then with the other ones, you guys got to use your imagination going for the most athletic guys that could be top 2 targets on your team. And in my ultimate tight end guide, which is available in the Fantasy Alarm Draft Guide now, I take every player and I give you 3 sections on each player. The good, which is the objective good things about the player. The bad, which is the objective bad things about the player. And then a third section called the advice. And that's my subjective opinion on whether I like them at ADP or not. So when you go through, you read about these guys, good, bad, and make your call. But there's a lot of guys out there that are athletic and they could be a top 2 target on their team. and they could make big moves. Mason Taylor, Dalton Kincaid, Kyle Pitts, Chigakonkwo. And if you say to yourself any of those names, you say, "Oh, ew, gross." Well, you don't have to draft them because I just named 4 guys. I mean, like, find your path to upside and then put that guy on the bench. And then I do a free waiver wire article where I'll be telling you who I'm dropping, who I'm adding, and we'll figure it out that way. It's not a strategy that ends when the draft ends. So that's what we do. It's been a good way to create upside because for 13 straight years now, a tight end has come from outside the top 17 in ADP to finish top 5. It's been Evan Engram twice. It's been Darren Waller. It's been Robert Tonyan. Last year it was Johnny Smith. Going all the way back to guys like Julius. Like, it's one of the easiest positions to create leverage at.
Which is why this year I think like what I'm really liking is not 0 RB but 0 tight end. You know, like earlier when Kittle was going in the 4th, even in the 5th round in early drafts this offseason, I was definitely hammering him. But we talk about the different ways to balance, and the variety that you have, Dan, in these double-digit rounds now at the tight end position really allows you to do that. Do you have anything to add, Dan, with maybe your global approach, your macro approach to the position, or the way Andrew is pairing his tight end duos?
No, I mean, you know, with Andrew, I mean, even though the picture might be fuzzy, the advice is very, very sharp. So, yeah, that's that's exactly the way I go about it. You know, if I'm not grabbing one of those early tight ends, I'm just getting somebody who I can count on for the first few weeks, and then taking my best shot at 1 or 2, depending on, you know, if I'm in FFPC, I'll probably take 2 shots because I can afford 3 roster spots on a tight end in that particular format. So, you know, then I'll be taking like a Theo Johnson or a Jatavian Sanders or, you know, a Rondé Gadsden, or, you know, pick your favorite guys, and I'm going to move them around a little bit because, you know, right now I don't have a lot of conviction on any of these guys. So if I don't have a lot of conviction, I'm not going to get roped into any particular one. The one I've got the most conviction on, Mason Taylor, he's the guy I'll take the most of as kind of my, you know, my upside shot. But you know, as Andrew said, you've got the first few weeks of the waiver wire too. Usually within the first 3 weeks, you'll see a tight end emerge. And a lot of people are not looking at tight end when it comes to those first 3 weeks of the waiver wire. They're just not paying attention. And if you see a guy who's getting, you know, all of a sudden, like, you know, hey, he got 7 targets week 1, he got 6 targets week 2. Hey, he's going on my roster one way or another. You know, I'll drop a lottery ticket running back or something like that just to get that tight end on my roster, and then I'll let him sit for a couple weeks. You know, let's see if he gets 7 targets again, 6 targets again. He's probably staying on my roster. If he all of a sudden drops down to 2 or 3 targets, hey, it was probably more of a game situation or game plan type thing where he was getting too many targets and now he's kind of going back to his normal level. But it's a situation that you always want to be watching out for. You're looking for, because as Andrew will tell you, you want a top 2 target earner on a team, and it's kind of easy to recognize when that's happening early in the season. And it usually happens on teams that don't have a lot of good wide receivers. If you got a lot of good wide receivers there, and the tight end gets 6-7 targets in a week, I'd probably leave him on the waiver wire. But, if it's on a team where there's not much going on for the wide receivers, hey, I'm probably going to take him.
There you go.
Yeah, I even like going 4 deep, Dan, at the tight end position. I just finished a build for the Superflex. If you go to the other positions earlier, go top heavy at receiver maybe, and then hit your running backs through the middle of the draft, I even like grabbing 4 of these guys. I know Joe talks about Chig. With a rookie quarterback, we talk about it often on this channel. Rookie quarterbacks love to lean in their tight ends. And, Chig is a guy that's kind of being forgotten right now out there in Tennessee, just because we haven't necessarily seen like those top end numbers from him with the quarterback play he's had. But Ward is a guy that could surprise fantasy land this year and produce above expectation. And even if he doesn't, he could easily lean on Chig. And then I know Dan likes this guy, Juwan Johnson, out there in New Orleans. The Saints is the other offense that Mason Spain and myself talked about on our last stream, underrated offenses. I think the Saints and the Colts are 2 that I like picking up pieces from just at their value. Let's talk old guys, Andrew. We've got the veterans. I talk about the changing of the guards here at the position. You got Kelsey, now maybe with a bit more target share open, with Rice probably having a suspension the first few weeks of the season. Andrews, Ertz, Conklin, Goddard, Higbee are guys, that, and of course our guy Hunter Henry, that are maybe, the nice thing with tight ends, they play into like the mid 30s these days, some even farther, but we start seeing them towards the back end when they're kind of in that 30 range. Are there any guys in this range that you are maybe fading? You talked about Hunter Henry as being one of your favorite. Is there a guy that you're maybe fading out of this group or out of these older vets?
Yeah. So of the guys you mentioned there, like I'm not really ever drafting Goddard because he's kind of the third fiddle, the clear third fiddle. And yes, he's good when the other guys are hurt, but he's the one that gets hurt every year. If you're going to bet on anybody, he's the kind of guy that's out. The other guys are format dependent. Like for me, I'll go for Andrews if it's more of I don't play in any standard leagues, but half PPR Andrews, but he doesn't really get the target levels the other guys get. If it's any sort of PPR or especially tight end premium, it's Kelsey, it's Ingram, it's Njoku. I mean, Kelsey had 97 catches last year. He had more catches per game than Justin Jefferson did. Ingram's walking into a situation where he's going to be the Joker tight end for Sean Payton. And Njoku, he's an interesting one because when things go well for him, they go very well, right? The targets are coming in hot and heavy. The reason I can't really draft him as my only tight end is I am concerned about the Cleveland Browns quarterback clown car showing up once again. And what I mean by that is they start the season and it's like Joe Flacco and everything's great for the fantasy assets. But then as they lose games, they eventually say, exactly, yeah, the clown car opens up and then they say, okay, we only have 4 wins. It's week 15. Let's just let the young guys play. And the next thing you know, like last year, it's Dorian Thompson-Robinson and Bailey Zappi. And they've been doing this like for years, back to like Deshaun Kaiser and all those guys. And it could very well be a situation where we get to week 15 and this is a team that Vegas has pegged for 4.5 wins. And then they say, okay, let's let Dylan Gabriel play. Let's let Shadur Sanders play. Let's let Kenny Pickett play or whoever. And then at the worst possible time for you in fantasy football, your tight end who is getting 7, 8, 9 quality targets is getting 6 garbage targets, right? Like there was a game last year where Jameis Winston threw 5 targets to David Njoku. He only had 1 catch. It's like when the clown car opens up, it can get real ugly. So I do get scared. If I have Njoku, I almost feel like you can't just say, all right, I'm all set, I'm good. You have to keep an eye on it. So I don't mind taking the guys in that range, but even with like Ingram, I still try and circle back for high upside because he has been kind of a low ADOT kind of target guy. He had the speed. I'm not sure if he still does to break off like 50+ yard plays. He hasn't done it in like 4 years.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Ingram and Njoku, Andrews is kind of an area that sort of scares me a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
There's because each of them just has some issues going on where you can see the downside pretty easily. That's an area of the draft where I prefer to think about what could go right rather than what could go wrong. But at tight end, it's a little bit different because you're not going to be drafting 7, 8 tight ends like you are going to be running backs or wide receivers or anything like that. So I'm with you there. I think I'd rather at that point almost drop down to like a Ferguson or somebody like that who I feel like Dak has always really relied on Ferguson as being a safety blanket. He's never going to be a top 5 tight end, but he's also probably going to pretty well play off his draft capital tight end 12. I feel like he's probably right in about the right range there.
Andrew, is there a tight end that haven't mentioned yet that's on your radar for 2025?
Yeah, I want to make sure there's 2 late situations that I think people should definitely keep an eye on. And they both involve rookies. One is Aronde Gadsden with the Chargers. We know that 2 different things here. Greg Roman at one point orchestrated a top 5 tight end season with Mark Andrews, where Mark Andrews only played 41% of the snaps. And the way that happened was Nick Boyle was the inline tight end playing like 70% of the snaps. And Mark Andrews basically just played on pass downs as a big slot guy. on 41% of the snaps, and he just got a ton of targets that way. So we know Greg Roman can do that. And in that case, Tyler Conklin would be your inline guy, and Rondé Gadsden would be doing something totally different at a converted wide receiver whose dad was a wide receiver. The other thing is Andy Bischoff, the tight end coach for the Chargers, was the Ravens tight end coach when they converted Darren Waller into a tight end from a wide receiver. And he's actually come out and made some comments saying that Rondé Gadsden reminds him a lot of Waller. I'm not saying that he is Waller, but that's when you start hearing those things and you have the history of that in the scheme, you always got to keep an eye on that player and see if they're going to deploy him that way. The other one that you can do in FFPC especially is in these like 20, 22 round drafts with your 2 late picks, if you take both Elijah Arroyo and Noah Fant, one of them is going to be the starting tight end for the Seahawks. Noah Fant could be released at $9.5 million in savings.
I think Andrew's being taken over by the Wi-Fi aliens.
Yep.
It's all good. Dan,
I'm with
ahead.
Andrew on that because you could end up with a little bit of a blackjack split on that Seattle tight end situation, because you could end up with Arroyo being the starting tight end for the Seahawks, and then Fant gets released and picked up by somebody else who needs a tight end. So you could end up with something pretty good there. I'm not sure if Andrew's back yet or not. Doesn't quite look like
looks like he's a little frozen. Is there anyone you're fading right now, Dan, tight end wise?
Oh, man. I'm having a hard time definitely clicking on, and Andrew already mentioned it, Dallas Goedert for exactly the reasons that he was talking about. I'm also having a little bit of trouble with Dalton Kincaid just because this offense is so multiple, and they just, they don't really seem to want to have a number 1 receiver there. He's a difficult click as well. I had been, up until now, having some trouble with Travis Kelce, just given the price. I mean, he is a PPR scam in Kansas City, and I'm going to have to look at him a little bit more now. But those would be the guys. And Mike Gesicki, another one I'm just having trouble clicking on, just because of the fact that you really need something to happen to Higgins for Gesicki to really pop up in value. Love the team, love the offense, but he's more of a role player than a main cog in that offense.
Sorry, Andrew, if you're back, do you want to keep going or?
Yeah, I mean, can you guys hear me all right at least?
Yep.
Yeah.
We can hear you.
This is the first time that I've seen it get bad where does it sound okay?
Your sound is good. I think it could be internet wise, just because it does get a little shaky, like very, very subtly, the voice. And then when you kind of reappear, it's a little clearer. So I think it might just be your internet.
Yeah. That's crazy because I've never had these issues. We get really good internet here, so I'll have to double check that after the show. Sorry about that, boys.
You got to double your power when you come into the district. That's just how we work here. You got to boost that energy, man.
Up, dude. I ran a speed test in between and it was good. So I don't know what's going on.
That's
so
weird.
Sorry about that, fellas.
No, don't even worry about it. I'm sure the audience is loving all the knowledge they're getting right now. Make sure you guys are smashing that like button for Andrew to help the channel, help the show. Dan and I bringing back the GOAT District High Stakes Fantasy Show for you guys, just to help you guys and bring you some of the best in the game, like Andrew. So we talked about fades. I think we all got our fades in at tight end, or did I go to you for a fade, Andrew?
I mean, I mentioned a bunch of guys I'm not really drafting. I will say the two is high-end ones. I don't find myself taking much of Sam Laporta or TJ Hawkinson. 2 guys that I don't really take a ton of at ADP.
I'm with you on Hawkinson. Laporta, I'll sprinkle in every once in a while, and obviously because of Connolly, I like the Minnesota offense, but it's just opportunity cost again for me with Hawkinson and just some of the other weapons that are in that offense. But yeah, I mean, the tight end position this year is fun. Just with all
for people out there.
Go ahead.
Yeah, with people out there, you basically have to ask yourself who gets more targets, Laporta or Jamison Williams. And then same thing, Hawkinson or Jordan Addison. It's just so rare for three guys all on the same team to get 100 targets. It just almost never happens. So it hasn't happened within the last 2 years per Pro Football Focus. So if you think that the tight end's going to be the odd man out, the third man out, don't draft him. If you think it's even a risk, don't. Those guys go in top 5 tight ends. Like if you think it's even a risk that it could happen, don't draft them. You don't have to draft those guys in every single league. You can fade them, and I just don't click that button much because I'm worried. And there's guys that I'm not worried about.
We have a couple questions from the chat here. Chat's been awesome today. You guys are been rocking the live chat. 1912 wants to know your deep dynasty tight end sleeper. If you haven't mentioned it, if you have, maybe just give a quick repeat, and then we'll hit a running back question for you.
Yeah. I think in those really deep leagues, you got to ask yourself which tight ends are actually backups where if the starter goes down, they could step right in and play the pass catching role that a good tight end plays. So I know everyone goes to Isaiah Likely, but he's not a sleeper. Guys, and I still hold on to guys like Ben Sennett in case Zach Ertz goes down. Even in very deep leagues, I'll go for somebody like Elijah Higgins, where the Trey McBride role is so entrenched in that offense, and Tip Ryman is clearly a blocking tight end. If anything were to happen to Trey McBride, now Elijah Higgins gets thrust into that role. Last year, he had a game where Trey McBride missed, and he ran a ton of routes in the slot, didn't produce, but just seeing him go out and play wide receiver and play a bunch of those snaps as a tight end, like that's a deep league play that could just leapfrog so many boring players if something were to happen to McBride.
Yeah, I'll go to my last pick in the fishbowl, Michael Mayer in Vegas. If anything happens to Bowers, just the talent we've seen, or they can even easily trade him away. I thought maybe the Dolphins might take a bite out of Michael Mayer. Dan, do you have anything to add with regards to tight end specific sleepers?
Yeah, I mean, we already talked about him, but Aranda Gadsden, especially for Dynasty, I think he's a guy who I've got a lot of shares of in Dynasty, and I will be holding tight to him pretty much almost no matter what happens this year.
Joe likes Noah Gray. One last question here before we let Andrew go. We know he's a busy man, and we appreciate the time he's given us today. 1912 has a question about the Patriots backfield. I know Dan's really high on Henderson coming in a little sooner than maybe some people expect. I like Ramondre a lot at his price. Where are you on this Patriots backfield?
Yeah, I like Ramondre at his price. I mean, I've watched the Patriots have Josh McDaniels on the staff for 18 years, and the vast majority of those years it was a split backfield. And Ramondre is just bigger, stronger. He's the incumbent. I think it probably will be split where Travion Henderson early on, I mean, like the floor for him is probably, in my opinion, like a James White type, which is a startable player. Obviously, the ceiling we're hoping is he just comes out and he's so good that they're just using in a ton of different situations like Jahmyr Gibbs and Alvin Kamara. But even rookie Alvin Kamara, when he was RB3, Mark Ingram was RB8. Like you look at Jahmyr Gibbs, he plays a bunch, but David Montgomery is still giving you weeks. So I think Ramondre is a good value now. That doesn't mean Henderson can't be a good value, but I'm just maybe if Ramondre keeps fumbling, it forces their hand. But I don't see why they wouldn't just use both players. It's hard to envision a situation where they just say, oh man, I know we gave you the extension, Ramondre, but you're just not going to play at all. We're just going to use this other kid, and you're just going to be on the bench. For me, I just think both guys are going to play because historically that's what they've done. It's always been Corey Dillon and Kevin Falk, or Stephen Ridley and Danny Woodhead, or James White and LeGarrette Blount. It's like for the longest time that's been what McDaniels did. I don't see why he wouldn't do that with these two guys.
Yeah, I really like Henderson as a prospect, so I'm definitely going to have some shares of him, but I don't think that's any reason.
Dynasty, I'm loaded up with Henderson.
Oh yeah, for sure. But even for this year, I think he could end up becoming a bigger and bigger part of the backfield as the season moves along. But I don't, as you said, Andrew, I don't think that's any reason to shy away from Ramondre at Ramondre's price because you're not being asked to pay, for a starting running back. Basically, your Ramondre is going down there with the backups, where you're starting to talk about, the Zach Charbonnets and guys who just mostly have contingent value, and you're getting a guy who can have some real standalone value and also still have that contingent value.
All right, gentlemen, chat's going a little nuts here. Joe Carlton liking Ramondre for the first half of the season, and then Carlton for the back end. You guys have been awesome today. We appreciate you guys joining. Andrew's been awesome. I know we kind of combed through all the positions. We really wanted to get your takes. I love what you guys are doing over there at Fantasy Alarm. Why don't you remind the people where they can get all your goodness, your articles, your videos on the YouTube channel, and anything else you got?
Yeah, I share all the free articles I do. Got a Kenneth Walker one up today with some gifts and stuff in there that people can check out. And then you want all my takes on every player, all my rankings, get a copy of the Fantasy Alarm Draft Guide. That's a living draft guide that has basically just gives you access to all our paywalled NFL content all summer. All the articles, all the rankings, the RB questionnaire I talked about earlier, my target totem poll, all that stuff is in there, all that goodness. So get a copy of that now, and you basically just get access to everything we have for the rest of the summer until your drafts. That's up now at Fantasy Alarm.
Check them out on the X Machine, Coop, Fiasco. Dan, what do you have coming up? Anything in the player profiler? I know you're just getting back from being away for a bit, but if you have anything coming up, I know next week we go, or actually that's the following week. I was going to say we go back to back next week, but anyways, I'll get into what we have coming up. Why don't you let the people know where they can find all your goodness?
Yeah, so next week I will be kind of out again for most of the week. I'm hoping to get an article up on the player profiler articles page, looking at kind of the psychology of drafting and how you can make that work for you. And we're going to be firing up the Fantasy Empire in another couple weeks, but not next week, but the week after that is going to be the inaugural episode for the season. So myself, Chris Vaccaro, Nelson Sousa, Matt Modica, we'll be having a roundtable, basically high stakes stuff. But, here's the secret for you. You don't have to play high stakes to enjoy high stakes material, because you know what? It's applicable to everybody. So make sure you're checking that out. And then Bradley and I are doing Stack Hunters. It won't be happening this week or next, but then after that, we should be going pretty regularly again. So be looking for those things as well.
Nice. Make sure you follow both of the Sharps on each side of me today. We appreciate you guys joining us this Friday afternoon. Make sure you tune in. Next 2-3 weeks are pretty loaded. We've got Dave Turp joining me next week for a draft in the FFPC streets. And then where I was going was the week of July 28th on the Monday and the Tuesday night. Dan and I are going back to back. We've got Abib talking about back to back. We've got Abib, the back-to-back FFPC champion. And then we've got Mike Schopes the following night from ADP Chasing, the voice of the Bills. And then the following week, Dan, we've got your buddy Bradley Stadler joining us on the Tuesday night. So we've got action-packed guys. We've got a lot of, sharp guys, like we said, coming in, some of the best in the game to help you guys improve with your drafts. We've got some live drafts on the channel coming on a regular basis. So make sure you subscribe, make sure you smash that like button. And, we're trying to get to 1,000 subs here. So if you know someone that's into fantasy, maybe your buddies, you want to share the channel, that's always appreciated. This was awesome, guys. Hope you guys got a lot out of it. I know I did. And we'll check you all later.
Goat District, the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text. That trash offer's the best. You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden, they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice, from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man, y'all know what to do. It's the... And I always be trading. And I always be trading. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.